Remember, never tell anyone you're home alone and never give anyone your address. Smart thinking.
Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
Hi, welcome back to World of the Psychic.
Together we shall cast ourselves into the future.
Seen any aliens lately?
This is a part of America we never get to see.
Are you by chance referring to the legend of the Loch Ness Monster?
A ball of twine that weighs 19,000 pounds.
What is this, nerd porn?
It is about the Templar treasure, but it's also about other things, conspiracy theories, urban legends, and other myths that are true.
You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the
Travel
Oddities.
Welcome to the Travel Oddities Podcast. I'm Harley, and joining me tonight, straight out of the loony bin, is Brett Manzer. Today is Monday, April 10th, 2017, and this is episode 71, the Norwichtown Cemetery in Norwich, Connecticut. We've got a great interview with author Zachary Lamothe, where we discuss the Norwichtown Cemetery, Norwich, Connecticut, a super cool museum, and we talk grinders.
Now, hang on. No, go ahead. Go ahead. I was going to say, I'll just save it.
All right. We also have some feedback to discuss and the details of our next Odd Box Challenge. So, Brett, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well, man. Live from the bunker. Not allowed to have shoelaces. Don't ask why, but no, I'm kidding. Just hanging out. Actually, just laying on my ass doing this thing. It's not bad. Literally laying on your ass? I'm literally laying down at this point. So this might be a better, I don't know what the sound quality would be like, but it's a better situation for me, I can guarantee. Well, we're going to roll with it and see how it turns out. So, how about you? I'm good, man. Went hiking yesterday, big national park, or day before yesterday. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's gorgeous out there. No oddities, though, so I would have to dig. Did you eat some pig yesterday, though? Yeah, Joe's Barbecue. Is that the name of it? Yeah, I think that's what it was. It was good. We actually tried to eat there the last time we were in that part of the state, and the line was so long that we said no. This time It was just to the door and not out the door and around the building. So, well, cool. Maybe at some point we can get a Yelp review on Joe's Smokehouse or whatever it was. Yeah, I don't know that we want Amber to do that review. She was not impressed. Too much meat on the bone, or is she just not a barbecue person? She's super picky when it comes to meat in general, and their pulled pork was a little on the fatty side. Me personally, I thought it was awesome, but she picked apart a sandwich pretty good. Well, anyway, you can't win them all. Absolutely not. So are we ready to bounce over to Zach's interview? Oh, yeah. I'm eager to get to the interview and then talk about grinders. Grinders, yeah. All right. We'll get to Zach's interview right after this.
Project Archivist, the podcast that talks about the weird, the wonderful, and the strange. Join us every week as your hosts Rojan and Lobo take a different look at the world around us through guest interviews, discussion, or taking a look at the week's weirdest news. Find us at www.projectarchivist.com, on iTunes in the podcast section, or on the Stitcher Android app.
On tonight's episode of the Travel Oddities Podcast, we have Zachary Lamothe. He's from Norwich, Connecticut. Zach studied New England history and folklore while a student at Boston University. He's a frequent contributor to the Norwich Magazine, where he writes about history and tourism. His first book, Connecticut Lore, strange, off-kilter, and full of surprises, was released in 2013, and the sequel, More Connecticut Lore, was released in 2016. Zach, welcome to the Travel Oddities Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks, Harley, for having me on.
I really appreciate you spending a little time with us, Zach. Can you tell me where your infatuation with lore and local legends started?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Norwich, Connecticut, and Connecticut, the Northeast in general, has so much history with it. And with history comes unknown places and abandoned spots that just sort of leave a question mark in people's mind. And as a young kid growing up in this region, there was places that really intrigued me. And from that, as well as stories that I heard from family members like my grandmother, just about what life was like when she was a kid, really left a mark on me that I continued to be interested in and foster this sort of infatuation with both legends, history, and finding that space in between where they actually somewhat meet.
Oh, that's awesome. So this has been something that you've been into for your whole life, or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, again, I remember as a young kid just being, I grew up in a house from 1752, and just having the history of the home and the neighborhood that I grew up was just such a part of my existence. And I grew up in a neighborhood of all homes from the same time period, where it really fostered the history of this area, and that was one of the big tourist points of the neighborhood that I grew up in. And so it always seemed like the American Revolution just happened a few years ago from the area where I'm from. So that with that, and then hearing the stories about certain places in Connecticut from family members, or even reading about it at a young age, I really always had this interest.
One of the things I really like about Connecticut and the general area, it's not that the rest of the country doesn't have a rich history. It does, but you guys have more landmarks for the history. There's more punctuation in the history books there, I
Definitely.
feel like.
Absolutely.
You grew up in this house that was built in the 1700s. Anything odd about that you want to share? As you can imagine, we tend to talk about some hauntings, that sort of thing, things that aren't really mainstream. Did you have any experiences like that when you were a child?
So I did not, but the house that I lived in, or that my parents still live there, does have a little bit of a reputation about it. And some of my favorite stories include that my parents were up in the attic, and they found a newspaper clipping about the home and about the swamp that was behind it, and that there was a man that was decapitated, that was killed and decapitated, and they found the body but never found the head in the swamp. So that was sort of something growing up that was like, oh, there is a skull buried deep into the into the swamp back there. Are we going to just find it one day? As we're just rummaging around in the woods. So there was that. There was another thing that my mother and grandmother heard a moaning sound, like a deep moaning coming from a certain room in the downstairs, and landed on my father. And then they went and checked on him, and he was on the telephone. So that wasn't from him. So that was sort of another one. And then another story was that an old dog of ours had gotten loose, unbeknownst to my family, but they heard a sort of a chiming sound from the kitchen, and almost that was a spoon that was going in and out of a glass. They went into the kitchen and found a spoon and a glass next to each other on the kitchen table, and then looked outside, and the dog was missing, and was able to locate the dog. So, a couple little stories there that I was too young myself to have any knowledge of it or remembrance about it, but things that were sort of, a fun fact growing up, and my parents were not very, they didn't really believe in the supernatural, so even for them to have this kind of experience was kind of cool.
That's awesome. I think as a child, having that ammunition, so to speak, with your make-believe and your playtime, would have just made it that much more fun, not just exploring and, finding a lost cave or, buried treasure, but there's, there's a guy buried in the backyard somewhere.
Right.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Well, I think that kind of leads us right into Norwichtown Cemetery, the topic of the evening. So can you give us a little feedback on the history of Norwichtown Cemetery?
Yeah, so the Norwichtown Cemetery is, in the city of Norwich. City of Norwich was one of the oldest English settlements in Connecticut, and its history really goes all through. It's almost like a microcosm of America itself. So it has the Native American history, it has the colonial history, going to the Industrial Revolution. It had a huge mark, and then through waves of immigration until today. So it really has this whole range of American history in one town. The area I grew up, Norwichtown, was really focused on the colonial and Revolutionary War era history. And the cemetery there is just a tangible evidence of its past. I mean, in the Norwichtown Cemetery, there was Samuel Huntington's grave, and Samuel Huntington, Governor of Connecticut, overall sort of a hero in town. Sort of the antithesis of Samuel Huntington would be Benedict Arnold. Benedict Arnold is not buried in the cemetery, but his mother is. And probably the most well-known story out of this cemetery would be that Benedict Arnold comes back to visit his mother upon a horse every Halloween night around midnight. So that's the most ghostly association with the cemetery. But it's a neat place to go and see the old stones and to see sort of the evolution of the gravestones over the years. It doesn't go to the skull and crossbones as much, but mostly does from the cherubs on to more of like the urn style and things like that. But it is good history left in the sculpting of gravestones. Now,
the Benedict Arnold story, that sounds a little bit like Sleepy Hollow to me. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Right.
Now, I did notice that they do ghost tours through the cemetery on a regular basis. Is that something you're familiar with?
Yeah, so Norwich has a very active historical society, especially over the last few years. There's a young woman named Regan Miner who's been just, so enthusiastic in promoting the area's history and has done tours. Like there's a Benedict Arnold tour, there's an Norwich industrial tour. And one of the ones they do is the cemetery tour, which they do a few times around Halloween. So to correspond with that, the area also does a big walking. It used to be called Walking Weekends. Now it's called Walktober, which is all the weekends, and not even weekends, but some weekdays too, all in October, of getting out and seeing basically different either nature preserves. It could be historic place. It could be some kind of interesting location that there's a guided walk to based on history, based on nature, something like that. And the cemetery tours there's a big part of that. And then throughout the year, there might be other ones too. But the cemetery tours are led by local historians, and they show different places like Benedict Arnold's mother's grave, Samuel Huntington's grave. There's one of my favorite stones in the cemetery is a man named Bela Peck, who lived to a ripe old age of around 90 or so. The interesting thing about him is his stone, that his stone is a large rectangle that looks like a piece of paper that's been folded out, and there's actually a hand perched atop his gravestone. So it's pretty creepy. It's also a good spot for a picture with just putting someone else's hand right next to his. So you have a live hand and a stone hand putting this parchment down. So is that a big draw, the like gravestone rubbings and that sort of thing? Absolutely. The tours themselves, I mean, they've been, even for people, again, Norwich is very rich with history, and it's one of those, it really is, I feel like, the main tourist draw in Norwich, Connecticut. We're right in between two casinos, Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun, which are some of the largest in the world, actually. But Norwich's main draw is still its history. So it's sort of like, people might come to the area for the casinos or for Mystic, which has like all the nautical seafaring history of the aquarium. But Norwich really focuses on its own, and these cemetery tours are really, really well attended. And the people that have put them on are fantastic. I mean, they're great storytellers. They're people that dedicate their lives to promote history in general, but especially of this region of southeastern Connecticut. So, and then there's school groups that do grave rubbings in the cemetery, and it's just a place that I feel like people have sort of transcended any kind of, even though there's stories attached to the cemetery, it's transcended the creepiness of the cemetery and more just as wow, this is a real cool place to check out and just sort of have a few quiet moments away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life and seeing this spot.
It sounds really cool. I really like the history of the area, like I said before. Now, I did notice outside of the historical groups, it does look like you have a few paranormal societies that have taken a big interest in it, things of that nature. Are you aware of any stories outside of the Benedict Arnold story about hauntings or ghosts or anything that would be a draw for those type individuals?
Right. There is the whole neighborhood of Norwichtown. I mean, it's quite small. We're talking maybe about a total of 5 streets or so. But your classic New England, your town green with many original homes that are still dotting the green, and in your church there. Then you've got your cemetery, and you've got the Samuel Huntington mansion there. This whole neighborhood, not just in the cemetery itself, but there are stories, paranormal stories all over the neighborhood. There's stories of a soldier that walks down one of the lanes into behind houses that used to be another connecting lane that doesn't exist anymore. So there's stories of him. There's an old tavern that's now a private home on the green that a former owner of the home was combing his hair in the mirror and saw the reflection of the former tavern owner who died at age 21 from a snake bite. They're combing, in the mirror as well. There was actually, for my second book, More Connecticut Lore, I was able to talk to he considers himself more of a medium or sensitive, and he basically what he did. He's retired now, but what he did for his day job was he was a meter reader. So he, in his section of the area was Norwichtown, and so he was very familiar with so many of the houses, and he could give me a story about almost every house in the area. And it was just neat. Even the house that I grew up in, other than the stories that I shared when as a kid, he had questions, and he had questions like, was there a dog that was sick here recently? And my parents and my wife and I just sort of looked like, no, I don't think my parents' dog has gotten sick. And then we realized that our dog had gotten sick just the day before, and even though it wasn't, the dog was located in the house at the time, but she was got sick at our own home. But the medium said she ate some makeup, so it was just interesting. And then he was talking about the presence of an older man that was on the staircase that thought there was music being played too loud from the house, and just little things that he said were very interesting. Wow, how would he know that? So I thought that was pretty neat, and really with the whole neighborhood, he was able to go and tell stories of his own, just his own interactions of figures in rocking chairs in the basement, or different different things and he goes into the church and sees figures into the church that's on the green. But those aren't as well known as certainly the Benedict Arnold one.
Sure.
Or, there's other places that are supposed to be cold spots that are throughout. There's a meadow next to the cemetery. So there's things like that happen as well.
It's super interesting. I couldn't imagine being psychic or sensitive and living in a place that's had that much traffic over, the last few hundred years. I would imagine that would be taxing, to say the least. To get a little more into Norwich, I found that it's known as the Rose of New England. Is that?
Yes. Yep.
Can you tell us where that originated from? Is that's some of the history that you're aware of?
Right. Yeah. So Norwich was actually an extremely wealthy town in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was one of the top 10 wealthiest towns in the United States. It had, I believe the statistic was like more millionaires per square mile than anywhere else in the country.
Wow.
So it was, a lot of industry. Textiles were huge. Gun manufacture firearm manufacture was also a major component of Norwich itself. And through that, there was a poem that was saying that Norwich, the Rose of New England, just based on the beauty of it. There was stately mansions going into the downtown, which still exists today. The three rivers that form the Norwich downtown harbor. So it came from this era. So, and that's just something that stuck with it as the Rose of New England. And it's interesting now because if you visited Norwich today in the 21st century, to the casual observer, it looks like it's seen better times, especially the downtown, and just to see where it was and what happened really when industry moved out of it. So it's a fascinating town. There's a lot to, I feel like a lot to that it offers. At the same time, again, to someone that might want to look for a fun night out on the town, they might not pick Norwich as a destination.
we run into that a lot on this show.
Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned the three rivers. I've been trying really hard to work on my pronunciation, so I'm not going to attempt to say the name of these three rivers, but if you wouldn't mind, that would be great.
Sure. Yep, so it's the Yantic. So the Yantic is one of them, the smaller one. There is the Shetucket, which forms sort of the industrial backbone of eastern Connecticut. Then there is the Thames, which looks like the Thames from England, but it's pronounced Thames in eastern Connecticut.
I would have butchered that one, for sure. And Shetucket was the other one?
Yep, Shetucket, exactly.
Yeah, I would have been fine with the Yantic. That one looked pretty easy to me. This town really, the town itself goes back to the middle 1600s, is that right?
Yep. Yeah, middle 1600s. So I believe it was settlers from Saybrook which is in another place in Connecticut that then settled Norwich and bought the land from the Mohegan, the tribe, Native American tribe Mohegan.
In town, there is something to do outside of hanging out at the local cemetery. You told me about the Slater Museum.
Yeah, I mean, Norwich, it's really one of those, sort of diamonds in the rough. Norwich has a lot to offer and has a lot to offer the visitor. It's just a little bit more to dig for. I mean, it has breweries, it has minor league baseball, it has great restaurants, it has museums. And Slater Museum is a very interesting one. It is one of two museums on a high school campus. So Norwich is really blessed to have a premier high school, and it's Norwich Free Academy, which is the public school for Norwich in 9 towns, or 8 towns around Norwich. But it's also can have students come from all over the state that would be considered on tuition, a private school. and it looks like a college campus. And one of the buildings there that also houses art classes and things like that is a well-stocked museum. The museum consists of pieces like casts of famous sculpture from the Vatican Museum or the Louvre or the Uffizi, of the masters in Europe, basically, that they took in, I believe, the 1800s. They actually made casts of these original statues, and these casts are in the museum here. So you can go and see, the Nike. You can go see a statue of Leonardo's David, not Michelangelo's David, but Leonardo's David is in there. Many more that are very well known. Head of Zeus. See what else is there? There's the boxer. There's different things like that are very well known, classical or Renaissance sculpture that the casts are actually there, and it's so neat to be able to go into this room and just see, you just sort of immersed in sculpture that is, it's fascinating. In addition to that, they also have regional painters. There was, whether it's different scenes or painters from the Hudson River School, not too far away in New York. There is Ellis Rooley, who was a folk artist, I guess you would say, from Norwich, who died mysteriously in the mid 20th century. Some of his work is there, or at least one. There is also a section with Native American and African art. There's samurai outfit. They have two of those. They have a whole thing of firearms. They have a colonial, a colonial kitchen set or what different rooms would look like. I mean, it's really an extensive museum. Again, housed in a high school, which is really something you don't ever hear. And it's just one of those things, again, that you have to dig a little bit deeper to go to. Mm-hmm. It might not be apparent when you go to the casino that right down the road you can go see classical sculpture or really good portraits and paintings, and it's very, very well done. They also have a rotating gallery, the Congress Gallery, which might feature like the best of Connecticut's artists, or it could be a different show with a specific artist. So it's really a neat place.
It threw me for a loop. I'm just going to have to say, when I started researching it after our initial conversation, I kept bumping into the high school information, and I was getting very confused. So it took me a little while to put two and two together. So that is really, it's different, it's neat, and it sounds like you could save quite a bundle on travel by getting to see all of that art in the States instead of having to fly all over Europe.
Right.
Now, go ahead. No, absolutely.
Oh no, it's neat. Seeing all of this, and if you I've been to a couple of the art museums in Europe that I've seen some of the original pieces. Like, oh, that's in Slater. Oh, that's in Slater. That's in Slater. So it's sort of cool to see that.
It's really nice to peel back the layers of a small community that has a rich history and find these interesting oddities. It's always kind of cool. Now, one of the things that we always like to talk about, we always throw in, is a good place to eat, and you were able to help with that as well.
Definitely.
So the place that you had recommended, if we're coming to town, is Delia's Grinders. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. Delia's Grinders.
Sorry.
Yep. It's a real hole-in-the-wall place. I mean, it's quite, in my opinion, the best grinders I've ever had in my life. And for those of you that don't know what a grinder is, I think I'm talking about some kind of dance or something. It's actually, it's a sub sandwich. It's a submarine, a hoagie, whatever else they're called, torpedo. So a sandwich on the long sub roll. They do a fantastic job. This place has been around for decades and decades. They have a couple tables, but it's basically mostly for takeout. But my favorite would have to be the hot sausage grinder. So not hot as in like spicy hot, but just like it's a hot temperature sausage grinder, and it's simple. It's sausage with the bread that's out of this world and cheese on it, and it's just something that I know many people that when they return to Norwich, that they live, from a different place, that they need to go to Delia's, and it's always busy. There's pictures of like different like Catholic, like just popes and bishops pictures all over the restaurant, and it's sort of a step back in time. Like, you go in there and it's 1955, and it probably looks exactly the same as it did in 1955, and it's the grinders are out of this world, and it's a nice experience there, and you're not going to go there for a romantic dinner, but you are going to go there if you want a good sandwich to have.
That's one of my favorite research items, by the way, is the restaurants. I did dig a little bit. I ran across a whole lot of people who say, I live in Florida or I live in Arizona, but every time I'm up or I'm back east, I have to go here. I tried to recreate it. It's not possible. So it sounds amazing. It's definitely on the list. I'm stoked. It's a long road trip for me. I'm in Oklahoma. If I'm in the area, I'm definitely stopping.
Absolutely. It's great. Great little place.
Well, I really appreciate the recommendation. Now, Zach, what's on the horizon for you? What do you have coming up?
So coming up, as you said, my first book was released in 2013, Connecticut Lore, Strange Off Kilter and Full of Surprises, and this show is perfect for it because it has the destination, but then it also has, in my book, also has the place to go, while you're there, while you're checking out this, weird attraction or offbeat museum that you might not know about, go check out this restaurant, go check out this park, things like that. So the book 2013 came out. The sequel came out just about 6 months ago in 2016, More Connecticut Lore, a guide to 82 more locations. And then right now what I've been doing is I'm writing for Norwich Magazine in a monthly column called The Rose City Resident, where I profile someone locally in town. And I have a couple dates lined up in support of the More Connecticut Lore book. On the 18th of April, I will be speaking at the Prospect Library in Prospect, Connecticut, 6:30 at night. And then I'll be speaking at the Torrington Library 2 nights later in around 6:30 as well. And that's also in Torrington, Connecticut. In the summer, I'll be taking part in the Connecticut Authors Trail, which is an event where there's, let's say, 15, 20 or so libraries that feature an author, and then the visitors can go get a passport, and you get it stamped every author that you go see. And then there's a big event at it usually takes place at one of the casinos at the end, like a banquet and a sort of a closing ceremony to this trail. But I'll be back on this trail. I was on the trail in 2014. I'll be back on it as part of the Scotland Library, and that is in Scotland, Connecticut. This will be the 2017 Connecticut Authors Trail. The date on that is July 20th. It's a Thursday, I believe. And then the day before that, July 19th, I will be at the East Lyme Library, and that's also East Lyme, Connecticut. And there should be, in the near future, I will be also in the Otis Library in Norwich, Connecticut, but the date hasn't been set for that yet. For information, I do have a website. It's Connecticut Connoisseur, hard to spell, I know, but ConnecticutConnoisseur.wordpress.com. I also update my Twitter page, which you can find by either typing in Zachary Lamothe or it's at CT Connoisseur. And I also update my own Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Zachary Lamothe Writer. And I also have an Instagram account, which updates with events too, and that's just Z Lamothe.
Great. I'll put all of that information in the show notes. Sounds like you're going to be really busy over the next few months. Now, I will warn you, when I come back to Connecticut, for my next Connecticut show. You're on my list, so expect an email from me.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Great. Well, Zach, I really appreciate you coming on the show and really enjoyed speaking with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is my pleasure to be on the show.
All right, so that was our interview with Zachary Lamothe, a.k.a. Zack Attack. I didn't call him Zack Attack during the interview. I feel like I should have, though.
You know, it's an interesting. I can't shake grinders, but yeah, it was a great interview. Great job, Harley. You're really nailing these interviews down. If I must say so. Thanks, sir.
I'm working at it. So the grinders thing, it's slang for a sub sandwich. A lot of people, it's not something that's used actually in the South at all, and really it's only used in New York and New Jersey. So I'm not really sure how it migrated to Connecticut, but this one place serves grinders. Dude, they're supposedly the bomb. Like, people will make road trips from Florida to Connecticut to get one of these. You know, we should have reached out to Lobo to see if he knew about this place.
A grinder? He would have said, yeah, I've had a grinder.
You made him sound a little British there.
Well, I did. I've had a grinder. I think we've had I'm sure. Would you say it's basically?
It's a sub.
It's a sub. Okay.
It's meat and cheese and vegetables on bread. On a hoagie, but they call it a grinder. So
I'll eat a grinder.
All right, so we do have some feedback to get to a little bit.
No way. Really?
Yeah. Well, some very specific feedback. So.
Uh-oh,
huh?
Well, I mean, when you say very specific feedback, there's no telling that.
Okay. Well, I'll just go ahead and spill then. Amy, our Twitter goddess, our social media goddess, made it clear to me that she doesn't like the fact that she doesn't really know my opinions when it comes to the oddities that we discuss. She said she's sure that she's not the only one, but it bugs her that she doesn't know how I feel about this stuff.
Oh, okay, because you're kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say you're kind of Switzerland, but you really don't weigh in too heavily on either side.
No, and my explanation to Amy, I think, is probably going to be the best explanation I can come up with. It's, I don't care. That comes off wrong, but
it does.
I don't, if it exists or it doesn't exist, it's not what draws me to it. It's the adventure, it's the mystery. Not knowing is the best thing. So, not knowing anything about it is the thing that really draws me to it. So, I think the explanation I gave Amy was, it's like watching Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
If at the end of the show I didn't find out if it was Old Man Withers or if it was, a phantom, I would have been fine with that. I still would have watched the show because I like the mystery. I like the learning more about it. So I am really not on the fence. I just don't know. I don't have enough information. I haven't been exposed to enough of it. But I like to keep an open mind.
Well, I know your last episode when you were talking, basically, I'm just paraphrasing here, where essentially you said, I've never had an experience like that. I don't know. It's when they were talking about paranormal events and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was a strong believer in this, a lot of this stuff. We've talked about this before. I was probably a stronger believer, 5 years before we decided to do this podcast than I am now. But there's probably a bumper sticker out there that says, "Show me a body," # Brett Manzer from Travel Oddities Podcast. But I mean, it's the truth. I'm like you. If there's some cool shit that happens between here and the destination, that's just as good to me as seeing or not seeing, or hearing or not hearing. I mean, there are things that happened on our trip to Hunaby that I can't explain. Does that mean that it's real? No. Does it mean that it's fake? Who knows? So
yeah.
I understand.
Well, I just think the actual travel portion of it is a big draw to me. So, I can go to Honeybee or, the Haunted National Park or whatever,
right?
And I can enjoy the trip and never have anything paranormal happen, and I still have a good time. So I think
Go ahead.
If you're in it for finding proof, I think you're up for a whole lot of disappointment. I'm not saying that there's not proof to be found. I'm just saying that to find evidence of something that hasn't been found in the history of man, you're probably going to run into a lot of nothing happens before you...
Well, and let's be realistic here. The chances of you stumbling through the dark with a flashlight and a camera phone and finding something are, I don't know what the percentage would be, but let's be realistic. They've been full-blown scientific expeditions that have turned up raccoon turds more than anything else.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. And yeah, I just think that if you're not having fun with the rest of it, then going to the haunted house is not going to be fun because, depending on the haunted house and the circumstances involved, more than likely nothing's going to happen.
Right.
We've talked to a few ghost hunters in our time, and they all say it's a lot of sitting in a room waiting for something to happen. So it really just depends on how long you're sitting in rooms. And
I do know, on the other side of that, if you sit in a dark room long enough with the lights off, your brain starts to, your eyes are trying to adjust, and your brain is trying to...
Fill in the shadows.
Right, fill in the shadows and things like that. So that doesn't necessarily... I'm not saying that it's right or wrong that you don't weigh in. I mean, I think that you've got a great baseline opinion of... and nothing against Amy. I agree with Amy. She's probably right, but I think I might side with you on this one. I understand. That's the thing. It's like being a political talk show host. Unless you're a political talk show host that everybody knows is conservative, or sports talk is another prime example where you really have to be neutral about, you can't show heavy favoritism either way. You kind of have to have like a blurry area opinion about shit. Because you don't want to, you know what I mean? You don't want to be like a fanboy, and you don't want to be seen as somebody that doesn't give a shit. So you have to strike that balance.
Well, I hope that people don't think that I don't give a shit, because I do. I think.
Well, you do. I'm not saying no.
I'm genuinely interested. And Amy even brought up the Ghost Leg event in Eureka. She was like, you saw something. And my rebuttal to that was it was 3:00 in the morning, and I was looking, through a mirror. Could have, it happened in a split second. It could have been a visual anomaly, something in my eye. It could have been a whole lot of things. I would need more exposure to make a conclusion about that particular event. So it was weird. I'm not 100% convinced that that's what I saw. 3:00 in the morning, my eyes were playing tricks on me. It could have been the other way. So
I don't know about you, but I heard a Bigfoot call when we were in Honeybee. I that much I'm sure of.
Yep.
Okay, you wouldn't get your crazy scared ass out of the car, but I
was barefoot and we were on gravel.
Well, everybody needs to piss every now and again. You got to stop and piss every now and again. So anyway, that was all I got on explanation enough, Amy? No, I'm joking.
We do need to discuss the next Oddbox challenge. I'm going to call the end of the challenge the end of April. This one's going to be easy and super inclusive. Share us in any way, form, or fashion that you want. Share us on Facebook. Share us on Twitter. Share us on whatever other social media. Download our flyer and hang it up. However you do it, just email us, Harley@traveloddities.com, and you're entered. If I catch it, I'll add you to the list, but otherwise, to be sure, go ahead and email me that you've shared a show, shared a picture, shared our webpage, whatever. And that's it, and we'll give away an Oddbox. It's going to be a T-shirt. We've got some super cool I don't even know what you would call them, a kitschy box, a whole bunch of bumper stickers.
I'll tell you what.
Yes.
How about I'll throw in a copy, a sealed copy of The Legend of Boggy Creek, the original cult classic.
Bull, you really have a copy of that?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I bought it when we were at the bookstore, and you're like, what are you doing buying that? I said, dude, you got to have a copy of the movie.
I don't talk like that. What are you going to do with that?
No, I picked it up when we were standing next to who we would find out later was Craig Woolhead. So anyway,
speaking of
Legend of Boggy Creek, go ahead.
Speaking of big names, in a little over a week, I've got an interview coming up with Troy Taylor.
Okay,
he has written over 120 books on the paranormal, basically travel guides to the paranormal, so right up our alley. If you've got questions for Troy, if you're familiar with his work and you've got questions, email them to us, hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, and we'll add them to the list of questions to ask Troy. And that really kind of leads us into our feedback section, or our list of feedback options.
Okay.
You can send us suggestions, give us your feedback, call the odd line 7865-ODDITY or 786-563-3489. Hit us up on traveloddities.com. Facebook, it's Travel Oddities Podcast, and Twitter at TravelOddPod. What else?
And there will be a forthcoming GoFundMe page set up to help pay for my gas to go to and from my various appointments for my odd challenge.
Also, give us a review on iTunes and Stitcher.
Please.
We're running a little light, and my demands of last week they went on deaf ears. We need that.
Especially you people in Bulgaria. Get on it. I got to shout out at least one country every episode. Come on.
Feel free.
Just saying. Bulgaria, whatever language you speak, please go to iTunes and Stitcher.
All right, but that's been the Travel Oddities Podcast. I'm Harley.
I'm Brett.
Peace.